Good afternoon everybody. Welcome to this week's BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar. My name's Laura. Thanks for joining us today. Our weekly webinars are aimed to provide advice and share knowledge amongst business owners on key business topics and specialist areas. This is part of our service to our Smart Room members. If you're not already a member or a BizSmart client and would like to access our archive of webinars, please visit our website, which is biz-smart.co.uk, and go to the Smart Room page. Our host joining me today is BizSmart Select member and core advisor Steve Parker from ICD International Ltd. Before we start the webinar, can I ask you all please to use the question mark function on your screen to post any questions you may have, and Steve will answer them at the end of the session. Thank you, Steve, and over to you.
Oh, thank you, Laura. Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody, or if you're listening on catch-up, good morning, good evening, whatever time it is. This is a bit of an extension and a continuation from a webinar we did in September about global sales and marketing strategies for UK growth and expansion. Fundamentally, we're going to take some of the tips and things that I've learned from spending an unhealthy amount of time overseas to help you in the UK market and to grow in the Black Country and beyond. So with a bit of upcycling on one or two slides just to remind us what we talked about last time, and with some deliberate pauses. We're going to try some deliberate pauses never before tried on webinars. Don't adjust the volume. They'll be entirely deliberate when we get to them. So here we are, some global relationships for Worcestershire and Black Country companies. And you might have read in the promo for the webinar that this came about from one of the aspects, which was I used to do 2.5, 3 week trips. And that all sounds very glamorous, but it used to entail an awful lot of times when things didn't go right and the carefully rehearsed sales pitch, the carefully rehearsed marketing spiel went completely out the window because you felt blooming awful, and you still couldn't simply write off the time that you'd invested in this. You had to recover pretty quickly, and you had to work on how to create those great relationships. There are lots of glamorous ways of describing international trade and exporting, but one of the ones that it occurred to me fairly early on was that the difference between a UK sales executive and an export one was that the UK sales guy might ring up his wife at 8 o'clock at night and say, "Oh, I've had a terrible day, love. You know, nobody likes my stuff. I've had 3 appointments rescheduled. I've no idea why I do this. You might need to keep my dinner warm and I'll microwave it when I get home at 10 o'clock tonight." And the export guy was used to occasionally ring his wife, and less often because it was easier. And so I've had a terrible day. My first 3 appointments cancelled. They didn't like my stuff. They said I was too expensive. I'm not quite sure why I do this, and I'll see you 2 weeks on Friday. And fundamentally, you then had to concentrate on developing great relationships and how you do that. And sometimes, what if the words didn't work? How did you make it do? So this is about also emphasizing the fact that as small and micro and medium-sized businesses, we have a huge advantage. We have the huge advantage in developing great relationships because we can choose to do so. We've got a great ways of putting more personality into our customer service and our people relationships to have an advantage doing it. And during the next time together, we're going to be looking at how you do it, how you can develop it, how you maintain those advantages, and how you do it. We're also going to be experimenting just as a webinar first, and something that you can then take away at the end of it and try yourselves, in experimenting with silences, which to my way of thinking are key to the relationships, and also how concentrating on the relation aspects in this. This isn't a sales training exercise, it's more of a something that's fundamental to your business. So that's all we're going to do together in the next 20-25 minutes, and we can pick up on it. So we're trying to get into, as it says on that, get away from the big data bit, the fact that everybody's just a name on a spreadsheet and everybody's just a name on it. I don't think we can, as small and micro businesses, afford to do that. So some of the bump about me that you've heard, that you've read about before, involved in exporting and selling stuff worldwide for more than 30 years now. Primarily work with UK companies, getting them into those exotic sounding markets and some which aren't. But because of that relationship aspect that we're talking about, I'm still doing work with people who are based in Singapore, the Gulf, and Namibia, currently quite a bit at the moment, a little bit from the Seychelles, and some people in the USA. That's because they kind of trust and know me pretty well and know that I'm thinking through their eyes rather than my own. And the other blagging bit on the bottom, I do speak a bit. I'm on a panelist at a Scale Up 2016 event next week, and apparently I'm now the business guru for a local radio station. So we do regular radio stuff. All happened entirely by accident, and I've no idea why, but somebody believes me. So the upcycling, because recycling and upcycling is really good, is in the last webinar we suggested that you should open your minds and your thoughts to less traditional ways of selling your product, to get away from the I just need a good agent or distributor, and to open up all of these routes to market that you're going to need to scale up your business and to create more sales. And to remind us of the slides, there are lots of ways and lots of routes, no matter whether it's a product or a service, into how you can create sales and generate profit. And on this slide, with our trendy bedrooms, fictitious company but based on one of my current clients, we can sell through agents, distributors, bulk, wholesale, overseas manufacturers. We can sell into shops, we can sell into fit out companies, we can find our end customers that way. Or if we don't want to do that, we can just use our own website, or we can sell through UK people. The relationship with all of those people is entirely different. Your personality is entirely different around a core theme, which is the core values, which you would have now become a lot clearer about through having gone through the BizSmart strategy day, and your core purpose, which hopefully now means you know exactly why you're doing what you're doing and exactly how you want to portray yourself into the outside market. And you will know from our training and our strategy sessions and our ongoing work how you're going to, if you like, communicate that in different ways. So I don't need to tell you your sales pitch or your marketing. You've already got that in your head. And if you haven't, then go back and listen to the previous webinar on the 20th of September or whatever, or talk to me with the details that we are in the end. So hang on a minute. We can't constantly talk for 2 weeks. We constantly, how do we do it? How do we spend a little bit of time concentrating on the relationships? So some things I learned from an unhealthy amount of time overseas. You, if you're running your own business, might argue that you spend an unhealthy amount of time on your own anyway. So let's just work a few things out. And I'd like to have done extensive research and come up with some clever buggers comment on what a good relationship is, but mine was a suggestion that a sign of a good relationship is when all parties and people are comfortable in the silences. So you're probably thinking now, well, that's a bit risky, and it probably is. So we're just going to try as a webinar first at the start of it, and then we'll try a longer version at the end. Hopefully you've spent a few minutes listening to this nonsense, and you might want to listen to some more. So instead of me talking for the next 10 seconds, I just took a little bit of a break, and you might still now want to hear the rest of it, even though I didn't fill that gap. And the other point that we're looking at in terms of relationships is we can all get a bit carried away with social media and all of our LinkedIn contacts and all of our Twitter ones and all of our Facebook's ones. But then I was also reminded that about a card which I couldn't reproduce with a lady sitting at her husband's funeral entirely on her own in an empty church, who says, I really can't understand that he had more than 500 Facebook friends. It can be very easy to get into superficial relationships now. And from an international perspective, I couldn't afford to do that. I couldn't afford to fly lots of times and the investment, and I have to do it now with my clients, where I just do a quick hit where then nobody remembers it. A fundamental difference in what I was trying to do was I needed to be remembered after I'd left the meeting, after I'd left the trip, and when I got back, so that it wasn't just wasted effort. So that was part of the thing. I couldn't do a 2-week sales pitch, and I couldn't just leave them with what I wanted to tell them. I had to spend more of a time understanding them and creating a relationship, whether they were busy, whether they weren't busy. And sometimes that was just about keeping quiet and creating the right vibe, if you like. So the starting point for that, which is why we put so much effort and emphasis into strategy sessions, is if you don't understand you in the first place, you don't know how to handle it. If you don't really understand what your company does, you don't know when to keep quiet, you don't know how to generate interest, and you don't know whether when somebody's actually already understands you, and therefore you don't have to concentrate on your product, on the service you can do. So that links with a cartoon, which again I couldn't reproduce, but it's on my office wall, which is, it's not easy being me. Sometimes even I have trouble doing it. That's a relationship bit as well. The overseas bit tells you that if you didn't have the confidence to be that salesperson that you always wanted to be, or that managing director that you always wanted to be, you had to find a way of being you. Bit deep and meaningful and philosophical, but worth thinking about for your own business. I'm not very good at impressions. Thankfully, I'm not going to try one now. Don't try and be anybody else other than yourself, and you'll realize that people actually find that interesting and intriguing, and they probably want to find out more about you, and it becomes less of a hard selling bit. So if we flick back to some of those shares, the image on the right was the fact that you always had to allow for the unexpected, and if somebody nicked your dinner, you couldn't react in a bad way because you wanted. But it was just an excuse to show 2 giraffes through a window eating somebody's ice cream, to be fair. When we looked at the routes to market slide before, and go back, and you'll be able to see this on catch up afterwards, you have to decide what types of business relationships you want. And if there's the 80-20 rule, that you get 80% of your business from 20% of the people, or might be 90-10, the idea of these silences and the concentrating on the relationships bit is maybe you can't afford to use some of these methods for all, a few hundred of them, but you can for the 10 or 15 or 20% of the clients that hopefully will become friends, if that's what they want, to get your 80% of the business. And consider the levels of commitment and how close you want to get to people, because not everybody wants to do that. If you just want to run a business where it's a company to a company, you can do, but I'm just suggesting some other ways of doing it. So instead of at your networking and at your next meeting, whether it's the first one, the second one, whether you've met people lots of times, this is just a few moments to suggest that if you put some thought into concentrating on the relationship and the solutions for the clients rather than your own sales pitch, it's rarely a waste of time, And if you create those firm relationships in the first place, you're likely to create that utopia, which is selling products and services that don't come back to people who do, because they don't just see you as a salesperson, they don't just see you as someone who's trying to flog them something that they can't do. And in the early stages, they will do it. They might test you out with some smaller opportunities, they might test you out with some smaller inquiries. That's not because they haven't rated you particularly. Maybe it's just their way of testing the relationship out, as well as your capability to fulfill it, and whether when you came over and you were nice to them and you seemed to get on well and you drank a few beers together or you drank a few coffees, whether you were doing that just as a crafty sales and marketing ploy or whether you were genuinely doing it. If you genuinely do it, it'll work. And I'm still working with people now that maybe I only see once a year, but that we've been working together, we've had our arguments, we've had our heated discussions, we've shared our good times together, because the relationship is vitally important and it's fundamental to my business. So we're talking about concentrating on creating positive experiences rather than just perfecting that smooth sales and marketing pitch, which may not be you in the first place. And one of the ways you can decide what style you want to do is to think of all of the people that have ever sold to you, think of all the people who've ever come through your door, think of the people who you spend time socially with, where you prefer the ones that are more silent than those that don't let you get a word in edgeways. Decide whether your personality trait will enable you to compete with certain types of them or whether you can just do it. And realize the fact that actually, if somebody came to see you and they were desperate for a sale, but it wasn't the right time for you to place any business with them, how you reacted, how they responded, and then imagine how you'd do it yourself. So again, you do get a bit philosophical when you spend too long away. I'm not sure whether this is my saying or I nicked it from somebody else, but the way of remembering it is, it's not the words that you say or you use, it's the experience you create when you say them. If you do it right, and sometimes it's when you don't say things, that you create the right expression, you create the right vibe, people have enjoyed that time when you've done it, and that helps to do the relationship. And it seems to me that most of the sales and marketing courses and training that you get concentrate on the other aspects, the harder aspects. These are, if you like, softer aspects of business relationships. We'll try another silence again later, but just try in some things. We'll give you a test later on. Just try leaving some gaps and listening and absorbing, and then sometimes in meetings you'll always find this. There are some people who say less, and maybe those are the most important and valuable people there is. I did a meeting overseas about 2 months ago with 15 people, and one person never said a thing, and I got more useful information out of them by taking the time to get to know them outside of the meeting than I did from the people who were pretending they had to be a certain type of director or leader or the group bit. I learned, for example, that for my glass company, that they didn't respond because they didn't want to embarrass me in front of their people, because their strongest feeling was when I mentioned glass to some of the others, they came up with these exotic ones, and the reason she didn't respond was that as a spontaneous tell us what goes in your head when I mentioned the word glass, her answer was the Czech Republic, and she thought that would embarrass me because I was selling Starbridge glass, and that was fine, because what I learned from picking up on the silences and what I learned from the relationship bit was that I could have sent her all of the inquiry. I could have chased her for inquiries for time for a long, long time, but she would have always sent some to the Czech Republic at the same time. Now, what's happening in the interim process is I'm concentrating on the relationships, and she's now jokingly saying, I promise, here's an inquiry, here's something I'd like to see if we can design for us, and if it's really good, I promise I won't send it to the Czech Republic to compete against you. So just an example which I thought of doing that. So it's about being remembered. It's about concentrating on how you remember. Now, you can't always be with people all of the time, and so of course there are social media, of course there are PR, and of course there are emails and keeping it. But there's also Skype and FaceTime, and we're spoilt by that. I never cease to be amazed that even in places like West Africa, these things work, and they can be quite effective. But maybe there's a lesson or a message to be learned in those as well, which is that if you thought that these Skypes or FaceTimes or whatever were just about repeating your sales pitch, you can be silent in Skypes as well, and they're a way of, just like when you use them for friends and family, they're a way of showing your personality, they're a way of showing your body language. And sometimes if you spent a while and they kind of like the fact that you're not the smooth salesperson who turns up in the three-piece suit or whatever the archetypal image is, just be the same natural self. Use it to be consistent with that personality and do it. We do smart boards on BizSmart, which gets me 10p for plugging it from Kevin. But we do those, and one of the things that we put an awful lot of effort into it when we did the experimenting with was to see whether we could read personalities and whether we could read body language and whether we could cope with silences, because that's essential. The silences are sometimes people's thinking time, and that's part of their personality trait. So one of the things that did come up, which we experimented with, was you can see the background, you can see people's decoration, and we took the mickey out of someone who sometimes helps to host one of these about their flock wallpaper and things like that. Frankly, if you think about it, it doesn't matter. It's a sign of a good relationship when people take the mickey out of you, when they think of quirky things, when I used to have, on one of my sites, there's a picture of a dog that used to be part of my glass company. And if you read the Professional PLC Limited Company Manual, it tells you to create a professional environment and everything has to be corporate branded. What I learned from running my own company, and particularly when I had my dog from before, was that instead of being embarrassed when the dog's tail came up and she looked at your Skype camera, it actually turns it into a human part of the relationship. And I frankly didn't mind if people asked me about the dog before they asked me about the inquiry. The point was they remembered the relationship. I hadn't just been categorized by the architectural ironmongery or the glass that I was selling. It was a personality, and they knew that by becoming a more accessible contact or a more accessible friend, we were likely to treat each other in the right way. But Skype and FaceTime and all the others are fine. And I'm not suggesting you don't do them for a minute. I'm just suggesting that occasionally the best way is to call and speak to people. I do it overseas. For some reason, the psychology is it seems more distant if I'm calling them by telephone rather than a Skype one, which can frankly look as if you're next door or even in the same room because the technology is so good. But sometimes calling people and speaking to people is rarely a bad idea. So I'll nick that back because just a little bit in advance. If you've got lots and lots of clients, for sure, you can't probably invest all of the time and effort into it. But if you think about the really valued ones or your really best targeted ones, instead of trying to keep tweaking your marketing message and your sales message and concentrating on what's the reason they're going to buy. I'm just suggesting that you put a little bit of time and effort, and even more time and effort, into spending time with them, having a coffee with them, getting them to think about the things they can't automatically think of, where they're expecting a sales meeting or one of those other meetings. And the clients that come with me overseas, one of their difficulties that they sometimes have is, of course, they've got the fear and they've got the scare value, and they're wondering how to cope with all of these cultures and things like that. And they're desperate to reel off their sales pitch because they think they're the best salespeople ever, and they think it's their company and that's going to be their version. And sometimes the trick is to have meetings with you where you don't even mention your product or your service, and you're just trying to work out what's best for the client, what their personality is. There are scientific methods of doing it. I'm just saying that whether you use those, you can probably work them out for yourself, because a small and micro business deals with people that they want to deal with. It doesn't matter how big or small they are, because that saves you relying on a legal system which, from experience, sometimes doesn't protect small people anyway. So part of the next bit is those are some thoughts on it. You can't cover it in 25 minutes, but hopefully we've given it a bit of a blast. Some other written thing, apart from the telephone calls, in these days of electronic media, handwriting notes and sending them to them, handwritten cards can sometimes work if that's your personality. The best online one I know of, which I use as well, which doesn't cost very much money, which can display your personality and can show that you really understand what they're thinking of. There's an online version called Jackie Lawson. The details you can get from somewhere else. But Jackie Lawson's cards are really animated. I don't mind supporting them because they're a small company down in Hampshire. Fabulous attention to detail, fabulous feel to it, and a novel way of making people remember you, even if it's only an anniversary that you wrote down, or something like that. The dog, incidentally, in it, as we're obsessed with dogs and these things, the dog that you see it is called Chudley, which is a character, and that's their own dog apparently. Another great small and micro business. So to wrap up this thing, my call to action is all you've got to do to get in touch, usual ways, but give me a call, connect with me on Skype and say, I heard your BizSmart webinar. Wonder if you've got some ideas to help me. Can I talk to you a bit more about relationship building, wherever it is? We'll do it over a cup of tea. We'll do it in person somewhere, whenever you feel like it. And the other plug at the end of this is if you want some more tips, you want some regular business ideas, you want some case studies to inspire you, do a regular slot on Black Country Radio the first Friday of every month between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock. Do lots of other regular slots as well. If you've got some interesting news, you want to get your company onto it, give me a shout on those things. We'll get you onto the show, and you can get your personality through on that way. We're also going to be doing a series of business tips and trailers on that. You can listen to it on 102.5 FM DAB, or frankly the easiest way is just to tap blackcountryradio.co.uk and listen to it on there. And warts and all, silences and all, deliberately or otherwise, you'll hear two people who just want to make business interesting and exciting.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Do I have to be silent? No.
Are we comfortable in
I'm
those
not
silences?
too good with the silent. Thank you ever so much, Steve. We do have a number of questions that have come in. So the first one here is from Dave from Fairfield, and his question is, does Skype work in every country?
It's a useful one. Interesting. Thanks for that, Dave. It works in many countries, but not always to the same level. So an inside tip in it is one of the problems that service providers and those big people that we are critical of in some countries is they're not big fans of Skype because they don't make any money out of it like they do if you call people on your mobile or on your landline. So in certain parts of the world, and the Middle East might be one of them, if you find that you try them and they do break down or they don't work as fluidly as you want to, the inside tip is try doing it from somebody's house or home or mansion or villa to your own one, and then it tends to get undetected.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how companies like Etisalat and EU in the Middle East are ever going to be able to track down so yeah, but generally it works pretty well, and sometimes better than you'd ever expect in those places.
Okay. Next question, Nikki from Hales Owen. How can I practice some of these methods without risking upsetting a business client?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because they might think, hang on, they don't know the answer to this. So it can affect your confidence. It depends how confident you are in these meetings. It depends how well you've assessed the other people. But you could try it in your own internal meetings. You could, in your own social situations, instead of thinking, I'm going to say something here, just sit and watch and listen and wait for the time to come up with the right lines for things. That's a good way of doing it. It can be easy to feel inferior by being out talked at business meetings, networking ones, and you could try it at your next networking meeting when you're with somebody. Just deliberately put in a slightly longer pause to see if they lose interest, to see if the vibe changes or how you do it, and then you can practice it.
Lovely. Thank you, Steve. So thank you again to Steve for hosting today's webinar. I will be sending out a copy of the presentation and all of Steve's contact details to you very shortly. Just before we close, a very quick reminder that this webinar is part of our service to our Smart Room members. If you're not already a member or a BizSmart client and would like to access our archive of webinars, please visit our website biz-smart.co.uk and go to the Smart Room page. On behalf of Steve and myself, we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for your time over the last hour, and we hope you can join us again very soon. Thank you for listening.